So in this next series of videos of lessons from my masters, what I want to go over is, and I'll reiterate this stuff as I go along in the videos. These are experiences that I had training under Grandmaster Perkins and also Grandmaster Karen. And these are my experiences only. And the reason I got to say that, put that up front is because every time people talk about their own experiences in the martial arts, everybody gets all crazy and everybody's got their own opinion on stuff. So this is based on my experiences of working with my masters and what I extrapolated from what they were actually doing. People have always asked me, what is the difference between, say, the art I was previously doing, Guided Chaos, and Warrior Flow? My personal interpretation is a lot of stuff in Guided Chaos is based on, the writings of Attack Proof, etc., etc. But there are a lot of things that my masters were doing that are not in the book Attack Proof because it was never designed to be a treatise, so to speak, on their abilities versus what they were actually doing a lot of times. And the reason for that is because your body is a part of your ability. And many of the things that John and Tim, as we referred to them, did were really a reflection of how their bodies were and what they felt they were capable of doing. So a lot of things they did were based on their own idiosyncrasies, and I cover that in the videos, and their own preferences. So it's not like they couldn't do other things, but like all human beings, we have our own preferences of what we like to do or what we're most comfortable with doing. The other thing you got to understand is that with my masters, when they did things, especially some of the odd things that they seem to do, they weren't always aware they were doing those things. And that's not a slight against them. It's just the fact that, like all human beings, there are things we all do that when we're, whether, throwing a football or, playing touch football or shooting basketballs that are unique to our bodies. And so we're not always aware of all the different things we do, all the little subtle movements that we make. And so these are the things that also I bring out that they were doing. They probably weren't aware of it because there's, in truth, as a human being, there's really no way for you to know it. One of the things that I have a series of videos I only do for my instructors, it's called Stuff I Like to Do. And those videos grew out of the fact that there were things that I did that I wasn't even aware of all the time, where people would ask me questions of why do you do this, why do you do that? And I had to actually go back and think about what it was I was actually doing to realize, oh yeah, I guess I am doing that. And it is the same thing. John and Tim were not gods, they were not perfect, they were human. And so the things that they did were a reflection of the fact that, like everybody else, we have strengths and we have weaknesses, but their abilities were exceptional and unique. One other point I want to make on this, and that is all of the things that I talk about in this series, and I don't know how long I'm going to do this series because there's just so much stuff that they did that, I could make a million videos and probably not cover half the stuff they were doing. I can only cover really the main things that I was aware of that they were doing, or I had discerned what they were doing. And what you got to understand is, as I go along and with these videos, as I'm describing these things, these are things that you can actually learn how to do. And I think that's one of the other important points I want to make. People think that what John and Tim did was magic. And the truth is, no, it wasn't magic. John used to say it all the time, it's no magic to it. And he was right. There is no magic to it. The problem is people looked for magic instead of paying attention to what they were actually doing in the body. And that's the key. Because if they were paying attention to what they were actually doing within the laws of physics, within the principles, within how the human body functions, not only could they start understanding and modeling what they were actually doing, but to varying degrees, develop those abilities for themselves. And I know what I'm talking about because there are a lot of people who talk a good game about what John and Tim did, or, well, this is what Tim did, or this is how Tim did, or this is how John did it. And my question is, well, if that is true, and you know that, why aren't you doing it for yourself? I don't know. I never understood and will never understand people training with someone, experiencing what they're doing, and not at least trying to understand what they're doing so they can develop those abilities for themselves. When people train with me, they tell me straight up, I want to be able to do this thing you do. I want to be able to do that thing, that you do over there. And I get that. I'm like, yeah, when I first started training with John and Tim, I was in awe of their abilities. And I said, I want to learn how to do those things. And in Warrior Flow, in my system, there is nothing that I do that I don't teach my students or my instructors. All of my instructors, especially my senior master instructors and my master instructors that I teach, they not only teach, but they can get their students to do those things too, because again, these things are not magic, but there is a methodology of how you can get there. In the videos, I'm not going to get too much into the methodology because I could be here all day, but also too, there are other things we do in our programs in Warrior Flow where you can find out how to, learn how to develop these skills for yourself. But like I said, I just wanted to get this preamble out there so I can kind of set the tone for what it is you're going to see and what it is you're going to witness as I go through certain things. But most important of all, as I'm going through it, just understand, first of all, these are my interpretations based on my personal experiences. And I had a lot of training with Tim. I had a lot of training with John. And my understanding of how stuff works and also things that they taught me directly of how they were doing certain things or how they believed they were doing certain things. And there's a lot of value in that. The other thing is, as you're going through it, just keep in mind too, I'm only giving you kind of the most basic understanding of stuff they did. If you can glean anything from it, if you can learn anything from it, great. And if you actually start practicing some of these things, believe it or not, you'll actually be able to develop these skills to varying degrees. Will you be able to do it as well as John and Tim? Well, I think that only John and Tim could do what John and Tim did because they did what they did within their body. And everybody's body is a part of their ability. And so there are things I can do that my instructors can't do because they're not me, and vis-a-vis. There are things that some of my instructors can do because some of them have good athleticism that I can't do because I'm not them. And that's just the way this works. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of this, and I enjoy making these things. And more importantly, these things are also leading up to the book that should be coming out sometime in the summer of 2025 of lessons from my masters, where I kind of go through a lot of this kind of stuff and explain a lot of stuff that still to this day, I can tell you, probably still confuses some people from the questions that I get from people still.